Hi there, and welcome to The Artist's Craft. I'm your host, Stacey Cochran, and we have an awesome guest with us today. I'm just thrilled to have him in the studio. Adam Shepard is the author of Scratch Beginnings, and he is an inspiration to all folks out there who really have a self-starting type of attitude and decided to self-publish his book, Scratch Beginnings, which subsequently became kind of a media sensation, if you will, and found a major publisher at HarperCollins, and led to his being represented by a major literary agency. Thank you very much for being on the show today,
Absolutely.
Adam.
Thanks for having me back on. This is great.
So we're about a year and a half into this since you initially self-published Scratch Beginnings. You've found a major publisher for the book. Tell us what's been going on with Scratch Beginnings in the past, say, 6 months or so.
I tell you, it's been a crazy ride, and you know, when you throw yourself out there, when you self-publish, you don't know what's going to happen. You hope for the best. You just throw it all out there, and you just kind of roll with it. And it's been quite a ride. You know, I self-published in '07, and late in '07, and then, you know, I started getting on this media. I get the Today Show and CNN and Fox News and NPR, and because it's an interesting story. You know, the book is good, but it's a really interesting story, and so I'm getting all this media, and through a friend of a friend of a friend, I got in touch with a literary agent, and here I am.
Well, one of the neat things about a lot of this early media attention that you were able to get was you were doing a lot of this yourself, which I think speaks to something that folks in our audience might find inspiring and definitely interesting. Can you talk a little bit about some of that early media attention and what you were having to do to get the word out about what was then a self-published book and is now a major book? Yeah,
well, I mean, there are three main reasons that I self-published initially anyway. One was because I wanted to retain the rights so that I could control, you know, giving discounts or who I could sell the book cheaper. You know, that's one of the main reasons. Second reason, I wanted to bring it out quickly. You know, if you publish, it takes, you know, a year, 18 months to get it in bookstores. But the third reason, and the main reason that we're talking about, is I wanted control of that publicity. You know, I didn't want to hand this to a major publisher and say, here, do what you can. You know, I wanted to be emailing, and I wanted to be calling, and I wanted to be sending out books. I wanted to have control of that. And now I've been naive throughout this entire process, but it's important to note that I wanted that control. I knew that I was going to spend these hours a day making the contacts.
Do you really believe that you've been naive? Because it doesn't seem like you've been naive. It seems like you've been very savvy.
No, well, I mean, I think I've developed that savvy, but absolutely. I mean, and unquestionably, I've gotten lucky along the way. You know, I mean, I had trouble getting in the News and Observer right here in Raleigh, and then, you know, 2 weeks later, I'm in the New York Post, and then the next day, Today Show's calling. You know, so I think being naive is one thing, but I think just diving in. You know, I mean, what did I know about self-publishing? That's what I'm talking about, being naive. I didn't know. I read Pointer's book and just dove in.
Well, it's an amazing story. For the 2 or 3 people in our audience who might not be aware of the book, of course, if you live here in Wake County, you've probably heard the story of Scratch Beginnings. But for the few folks in the audience who aren't familiar with the story behind Scratch Beginnings, what is Scratch Beginnings?
Basically, what I did was I started with $25, and they closed on my back in a randomly chosen city out of a hat to see if in 1 year I could have $2,500, a car, and a furnished apartment. It's kind of, and it's a very pertinent story today, but it's kind of this discovery of the American dream. And as we talked about the last time I was on the show, the reason I did it was in response to nickel and dime. You know, I wrote this in response to a book that Barbara Ehrenreich wrote kind of on the death of the American dream. And so she had her side, I had my side, and that's what it was all about.
I wonder if you still feel the same way now that you've had a year and a half to sort of, you know, live with the book and live with this and process it day in and day out and answer questions on the internet and at bookstore events. Do you still feel the same way about nickel and dimed?
Oh, much more so.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the reason is, you know, initially I didn't see the full picture of the controversy here. And I did as soon as people started blogging about me. I discovered that. But I think the emails that I get, my goodness, people saying, oh my gosh, thank you, you know, we were thinking it and you wrote it. And my favorite emails are the ones where people say, hey, listen, you know, cool story, but I'm a single mother, let me tell you what I did. You know, so I think to see how overwhelming it's been, people supporting and saying, hey, we've got great stories too, I think that I believe in this now more than ever.
Was your initial intent to inspire people to be able to control their own destinies? Was that part of it, or did you just want to explore and see what would happen if you did this?
Exactly. Initially, it was a self-discovery. You know, I mean, if I have a book, great. If I can tell this story, that'd be fun. I mean, I'd love it. You know, I mean, and to be on the Today Show, I mean, that's awesome. But I think initially, I wanted to meet the guys in the homeless shelters. I wanted to meet the guys that are moving furniture. You know, and I think that's what's so great about this is I'm able to carry this story over to my life now. I mean, this has defined who I am now. I still drive the same car. I still cook my own food. I'm a cheapskate because this story has defined my life now. So I think that's what's so important to note is the book is great and I love it, but I think I'm able to carry that forward into my own life and in other lives as well.
Did you think at the time that you went through this process of actually going to Charleston, was it even on your radar that you were going to publish a book at that point, or did you just want to learn from the experience?
No, I definitely wanted, I mean, he was definitely on the radar. I had the introduction written, I was journaling every night, so I definitely wanted to write the book. But I didn't, you know, I didn't solicit an agent or a publisher ahead of time because A, that's going to take away from the story, you know, I mean, I don't want to have that going in, that safety net going in. But B, I knew I really wanted to self-publish this. If I do, you know, I want this book to be mine. And so it was definitely on the radar, but I think I didn't know that that a book was gonna come until I started to meet Derek and Omar and BG and Mark. I mean, these guys that I meet. I think once I met them and saw that they had a story to tell is when I decided that a book would be great.
Fascinating. Well, if you're just tuning in, the guest is Adam Shepard. The book is Scratch Beginnings. It has become sort of a model of taking a self-published book, doing the best with it a person can possibly do, finding a major publisher, and then kind of living the life of being a successful author. So I guess one question that I have is, have you quit your day job?
I did. Well, I kind of phased out. I was working as a sky cap at the airport. As I mean, it cost me a lot of money to self-publish, and I mean, I was feeding all my money, all of my tips into this. And once the Today Show called, you know, I cut back weekends, and then I've kind of phased out from there. And I'm so fortunate to have had that job to be able to do this. But I think now, you know, I'm trying to get into speaking and writing other books, and so my time is kind of monopolized by that.
And speaking of speaking and doing other books, you've been out on tour now for the new hardcover edition published by HarperCollins of Scratch Beginnings. What's one of the biggest things that has kind of surprised you in actually going into all these strange towns and strange bookstores and meeting readers of the book?
Well, it's been a very grueling process. I mean, because I set up the entire 19-city tour myself, and you know, I was flying out and doing 2 or 3 cities at a time over this, you know, 8-10 week period, and so it was very grueling. But it was worth everything. I mean, to be able to go on the radio and TV, and then to be able to, you know, sit in front of 20 people or 10 people or 50 people and talk about my book. I mean, my gosh, how rewarding is that, you know? And so I think the most surprising thing for me at this point is how interested people are. I mean, people come to hear me talk about this. They ask questions. They're interested. They want to shake my hand and they want me to sign their books. I mean, who the heck am I, though?
But that's got to feel satisfying.
Oh, it's so satisfying. But I think it is kind of surprising. And along the way in these cities, I've had friends, you know, old friends come to visit. You know, in Houston, I had my friend Varice came, and you know, he's like, dude, Shep, who the hell are you? You know, what are you doing? So I think it's been very refreshing and satisfying and a little surprising at times.
Very cool, but you still have to take out the trash every night.
Oh,
you know, still
that hasn't changed.
That kind of thing. Well, it's interesting to hear, and I think our audience, who I think consists of a lot of folks who are interested in books and maybe aspiring writers as well, and maybe some people who are on the fence about self-publishing or traditionally publishing a book, might be interested to hear that you're actually setting up the tour yourself. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between, you know, initially self-publishing the book and having to do everything on your own, and now having HarperCollins, a publicist, and a marketing machine that is a major publisher?
Right.
How do you compare setting up things like bookstore events and radio interviews and such?
Well, first let me back up a little bit and say I went from going to self-publishing. After I started to get this media, I solicited 70 agents, and you know, I threw out, you know, here's my book, here's my website, you know, did a query letter, I did that whole thing, And essentially I got 70 rejections. Either they ignored me or they weren't interested. And then from there, you know, so I figured it would never happen. And then I had lunch with Dave, and Dave knew Steve, and Steve knew Ted, and Ted knew Shelley. I mean, literally, you know, and Shelley was at Trident in Manhattan, and he was a music agent, and he introduced me to Dan. So I think that's what I say when this whole process, you don't know what's going to happen. You just knock on every door. You don't know what's going to happen.
Sure.
And so now here I am, and like you say, I've got this marketing machine, you know, with HarperCollins. I mean, and it's different now with this economy, but there was when I first met with them, the joke was, well, we'll just throw money at it. You know, that's what they do. You can't do that as a self-publisher. They can just throw money at it all day long. So that's the main difference that I've seen, is they've been able to take all these different avenues, and you try radio, you try blog, you try TV. I mean, they've been able to go all these avenues that are a little tougher with resource-wise self-publishing.
Well, it's interesting to hear too about the literary agents and sort of that process. Even after you had been on the Glenn Beck program and you know and on the Today Show, and the book was, you know, an Amazon.com bestseller, having any rejections come through, it's a story in perseverance. Really.
Oh, you're telling me? That was my pitch. Hey, I'm going on the Today Show. Hey, you know, this is going to be big. And
what do you think accounts for that then?
You know, it's tough to say. I think that each agent has their own taste, and I think that's the whole idea there. And from what I know, I mean, you know more than I do, but from what I was able to see, that it just wasn't a right fit for the agents that I was soliciting, you know, and that's why.
How did you decide on the ones you were soliciting?
I got a list from offline. I got a list of just, you know, top 150 agents or something.
That represented that type of.
Well, no, I think it was pretty broad. I think that the list I got was broad, nonfiction, fiction, and that's what I wanted, because I wanted to just try everybody out.
Sure.
And so nobody was interested, but I think that's the thing, is I found, and I'm very fortunate to have found an agent who was interested, you know, and that's why.
By sticking with it?
By sticking with it. I think and I hear it so many times that, you know, authors will say, oh, well, I got 90 rejections in 91st. It's always the 91st, you know, and I think that you find an agent that's interested in that taste of book.
Well, I think there's a lot of lessons for me. I'm learning a lot here, and I'm sure folks who are watching the interview are getting some ideas as well. There's the lesson of perseverance, both when you first started and self-published the book and were relentless about trying to spread the word about the message of the book and the story. And then there's the lesson of perseverance with the literary agents. But one shouldn't overlook the fact that the initial impulse to write this book was grounded in something that is, you know, universal and matters. There's a deeply compassionate story underneath this that sort of serves as the fuel, if you will, to say, hey, I want to get this book out there. I want to spread the word about it because there's a story here that people don't know.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's what's driving me, is that I'm passionate about this story. I'm passionate to get it out there. You know, if I sell 8 books, that's 8 people that are reading my book, you know?
Sure.
And I think that if you don't have that, if you don't have that passion, then what are you doing? You know, and if you're driven by something greater than yourself, like the American dream, as I am, you know, and if you want to get it out there, then everything else, the passion and the ambition and the perseverance, that follows. And so I think I've been fortunate that I love this story and I love getting it out there, and it makes everything else, it's still a challenge, but it makes everything else easy.
The guest, Adam Shepard, the book is Scratch Beginnings. We've been talking about this just, you know, meteoric rise to success with a book. Of course, for every Adam Shepard, there are 10,000 folks who self-publish a book and might not do quite as well, but it is a model in what can happen if you write the book for the right reasons, and if you do all the things you need to do in terms of marketing the book, finding the right agent for it. I wonder if you, was the process, because the book was done, you had it, you know, bound and everything, and it was selling very well. What was the process then, Adam, when you had an agent who said, okay, I want to represent this, it's going to sell, I know the right publisher for this. Once it's sold to Harper, what was that process like working with an editor? Did they just take, you know, your PDF file of the inside of the book, or a Word document file, and say this is ready to go? Or?
Well, they took the Word doc. There wasn't a whole lot of editing they wanted to do. You know, because I'd already been through, I got 2 editors from NC State, I had all my first readers, I had a copy editor. I mean, I had everything already packaged nicely. But they, they had a couple tweak here, tweak there that they wanted to do, but for the most part, it was ready to go. They changed the cover. The cover is way sexier now. Have you seen the new cover?
I have.
Great. Yeah, it's way better now.
But the cover design was basically the same.
Same design, but I mean, it's not. It's it's the same picture, but I mean, they with the handwriting, I mean, they just did it a lot better. But that's, I mean, basically it was ready to go, I mean, it was like, here, let's throw it out on the market. And I think the main reason they bought it is because they saw the potential for the backlist. They saw potential for, Coastal Carolina University, it's their summer read this summer, so I think they saw potential, 10 years down the line for this book to still sell a little bit.
And that's really how publishers make a lot of their money, is on that backlist, and is keeping a book in print for many, many years. I think it's a great point that you make. So what did you do in that intervening period from when the book sold? How long a period was that from when it sold to when it was published?
It was actually kind of quick for publishing. I mean, it was April to October. October it came out. So it was rather quick as opposed to how long publishing could normally take. But I started working on my second book. I've really been trying to get my speaking off the ground. I mean, that's what I really love to do, is go out and speak to colleges and high schools. So I was able to do that. I was able to go to shelters and a couple of prisons and speak. But I couldn't do that. That's the tough part, is they said you can't do any publicity. You can't sell your books. I have these books in the storage that I can't sell anymore. So I couldn't do a whole lot with the book. So I had to kind of move in a different direction for a time period. But then the main thing I did was set up this book tour. Because I told them, I said, I want to go out there on my own dime. I'll organize it, everything. I want to go out there and really broaden my reach. And so that's what I did.
Has that been worth it? Financially,
no. I mean, it's never, unless you're a big time, author, it's not profitable to do a book tour. You should definitely put your resources into, staying at home and get out on blogs and do phone radio interviews and whatever you can. But that was never what it was about. I knew that if I'm sitting in front of 20 people and they're here to hear about my book,
sure,
forget the money. I'm happy to fly out there but I think also, if I'm in Austin, Texas, they're not going to have me on TV if I'm in Raleigh, and there are radio interviews that aren't going to have me because I'm in Raleigh, and newspaper. So by being in Austin, Texas, all of a sudden I get on TV, I get 2 radio interviews, and I get a blurb in the paper. So I think, in the end, does it make sense financially? Probably still no. The exposure, I mean, you just got to keep knocking it down.
Well, this is a great story, and I don't mean to put you on the spot about it, but a lot of people who think about publishing their own book, or even who have a major publisher who have to finance their own tour, they have to make this decision. And it's right where you're at, so it might be sort of a sensitive topic, but I think, like what you're saying, is if you get out there and you maximize your exposure by getting on a radio in Austin or in Portland, and getting in a newspaper as well, then it makes it a little bit more worth your while to do that. But then again, I'm hearing another theme kind of coming through, that there's an underlying point to doing all this, and it isn't about dollars and cents for you. It's about spreading the message of what it's like to live in a homeless shelter and to pull yourself up from that and be able to do it. And that's kind of fueling all this.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. And I think, when HarperCollins bought the book, they were very generous to me financially, so I was able to do this. I was very fortunate to be able to do this. But really, I just wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about my experience. I wanted to hear, I get especially in Austin, talking to Austin, I get all kinds of hostility, and that's what I love. I have these audiences that are engaged, and they have questions, and they want to challenge me, and I think that's what I really wanted. And again, if that's your passion, if that's your motivation, then everything else will fall into place. Maybe you have a bestseller, maybe not, but you're out there talking about your book.
Very good. If you're just tuning in, the guest is Adam Shepard. The book is Scratch Beginnings. We've been talking about the rise to success with this book. So what would you say, where are you going to be in 5 years from now?
Where am I going to be in 5 years?
When you think about it, when you're home, thinking about, well, where do I want my career to go in 5 years? What do you picture?
Well, like I said, I really enjoy speaking. That's what I've been getting off the ground for the last 6 months, and I'm booking these speaking engagements at colleges, and so I can definitely see myself doing that over the next 5 years. But it's funny, 18 months ago, the question was posed to me, what's your next book going to be? And, I said, well, I mean, this is it. I don't have another book. And now, my goodness, I'm in the middle of my second book. I've got 2 more ideas. I mean, you know, so, because I never wanted to write just because I'm a writer. You know, I wanted to write because I'm passionate about it. And so I can definitely see myself, as long as I enjoy what I'm writing about, I can continue to write. So I think writing and speaking is where I see myself in 5 years. And
very good.
You know, so we'll see. Yeah, I mean, who knew I was going to be here, you know, 18 months ago? So who knows what's going to happen? Well,
speaking of who knows what's going to happen, huge things have been happening around this book. One of the things we talked about before we came on air was the fact that there's a little bit of buzz about a possible TV show with Scratch Beginnings on a national level. Can you talk about what that's about? Or go ahead.
Well, I optioned the movie rights to Mitchell Peck, who's a producer out in Hollywood, and so he's got 18 months to kind of put together either this movie or this TV deal, and that's what he's working on now. And I think that's particularly fascinating because here I am, I'm a young, healthy white dude, you know, I've lived the American dream, you know, but what about a single mother? What about a young black man or an old Hispanic man who doesn't speak English, you know? So I think the idea has arisen that it would be a great reality show to bring in a bunch of different people from different demographics and throw them into a city with $50 or whatever, $100, and see how they cope, see what they do, you know, see how the single mother, see what she does compared to the young black guy or a young white guy. So I think it would be a fascinating reality show, and that's one of the things that we're working on now.
It's kind of Survivor homeless style, if you will.
Exactly.
Not to put too fine a point on it, but yeah, I think it's a great idea. It's interesting to see that it's in development. So how did you hook up with Mitchell Peck? How did that come about?
He saw me on the Today Show. He saw me on the Today Show. He bought the book first. He bought the book and read it first. You know, he didn't just call me right away. And see, that's another thing is my agent, he has contacts in Hollywood, and he's throwing it all around Hollywood, you know, trying to sell the movie option, and nobody was interested except for Mitchell Peck, who had already come to me. And Mitchell Peck he's not a Steven Spielberg. I mean, he's not a big-time guy, but he's passionate about this story. He knows what he's doing, and he's passionate about this. And so there again, you know, he was the guy that was ready to bite on this. And so I've been very happy working with him, and I'm excited to see where this can go.
Fascinating. Well, how much time do we have in the back, folks? 5 minutes to go. So you're considering self-publishing another book. We talked about this via email a couple of days ago, and you mentioned it a minute or two ago. Yeah. What's the new book about?
The book I'm working on now, it's a little bit less exciting than Scratch Beginnings, but the book I'm working on now is kind of a survival guide for college. It's called The Best 4 Years, and it's about making the most of your college experience. Because I think that's what I've seen a lot with my peers is we kind of go to college and we're hanging out for 4 years and we graduate, rather than going and really attacking the opportunities in college. So that's what I'm working on now, and I see such a niche market, you know, rather than, this has more mainstream appeal, but I see such a niche market that, you know, I think it's better self-published so that I can attack that market.
Is part of your thinking that you want to be speaking at the college level and doing that sort of speaking tour?
Exactly. So I go to a college and I say, hey, listen, you know, buy 100 books and let me come speak, you know, and so I put a package together, or however they want to do it. Or I go speak at a high school commencement, and then afterwards I sell 100 books, you know. So I think since that's what I'm so passionate about, I think that's a good direction for me to go.
Very good. But now, certainly you considered shopping the idea to your agent, or did you not?
Nope.
You said, this is one I'm just going to self-publish?
I told him, yeah, because I've got ideas, a couple ideas for books I'd like to write that are published, but I think I'm realistic, and I know that this is better self-published. And I told him that, you know, and he, you know, we've been honest with each other, and he said, go for it, you know, go. So especially now, because the economy is such, you know, Collins just went under, so the economy is such that, you know, they're not buying as many books maybe, you know, and it's a tougher sell. So I said, you know what, don't even worry about it. I want to get this out now. I'll go ahead and sell. You know, you self-publish and it's out in a month or two. So I think that there are all these motivations for me to go ahead and get it out there.
And they seem to be pretty encouraging and supportive of that.
My agent, or?
Yeah, your agent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's, you know, and he's got all of these big-time clients, and I mean, he's working with these guys, and I think that it's only fair that he gets to work on a project that he's passionate about and I'm passionate about, and I think that's why this one's better to stay with me, and I'll work with him in the future.
What are a few of the biggest lessons that you've learned through all of this? You've learned a tremendous amount about marketing books, publishing books, all of this. What are some of the lessons for aspiring writers, thinking about aspiring writers?
I think it's a great business lesson, and I joke a lot that I'm a businessman that wrote a book. I'm not a writer that's trying to get into business, and I think that's my passion is business, and I think it's been, a great lesson for me to learn how the market works and how to put all the dollars and cents together. I think the other thing is really, like you were hinting at before and talking about before, is persistence. I mean, my goodness, there's a lot working against you as a self-published author. It was tough for me to get over here into Quail Ridge, and I'm a hometown guy, so I think, and they've been good to me since, I love Quail Ridge, but that's you're working with it, there's so much working against you, and but I see, if you like that challenge, like I do, then you just go out there and start knocking on every door.
Well, we're down to about our last 2 minutes. I'm curious what advice you would give if you're speaking to an audience of 50 people who are on the fence about what to do with their book. Like you said, everybody knows the odds of finding a major publisher out of the gates is like winning the lottery. What advice do you give to audiences about whether they should self-publish their book or traditionally publish a book?
My advice would be to give it a month. Go after a traditional publisher for a month. To knock on every door, send out proposals, go hard for a month. And then engage your own time, but I think a month, and then it's like, okay, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and self-publish this. And it really depends, on a preference, but for me, you self-publish, you have your book out there, and then you can really learn about the business. And if it's something, if you're just trying to be a one-hit wonder, it changes things as opposed to, continuing to write. So I think learning the business, self-publishing is a great way to learn the business.
It's fascinating. I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen personally in the past decade or so, or more of being in the business, is seeing that transition from sort of the skepticism about self-publishing to more of an embrace of, okay, this is a way for people to gain entry into our profession.
Oh yeah, I think that some people, when I say I wrote a book and they say, oh, who published it? I say, I did, and some people say, oh, cool, and other people are like, oh, because there's that stigma that, oh, well, maybe you couldn't get published or whatever. And I think that stigma is kind of easing up, like you say, over time, and because there's so many other people that are self-publishing very good books. I mean, just because you self-publish doesn't mean it's a bad book at all.
Well, and yours is a story in that lesson, I think. And a handful of other folks who have done very well. They had a story to tell. There was an audience receptive to it. We're just about out of time here today, so I want to thank you very much, Adam, for joining us in studio. For all of us here at the Raleigh Television Network, Marnie and Michael working hard back there in the control room, and for the wonderful staff here at the Raleigh Television Network, I want to thank you very much for tuning in. Thanks so much.